Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Rabbi.
Okay, so we're continuing the next chapter. So it says the Tur here, "Mevarchin al geshamim mishyardu kol kach ad shirbu al haaretz." So the first thing he tells you here is that there is a blessing which is made for rain. And today, the truth is, that we don't say this very often, almost never really. I'll explain to you why that is. But let me just first read the Tur. מתכוונים מקום אחד, כשתרד בהם הטיפה תראה בהם כמו אבעבועות ומה הוא מברך. So he says, right, that if the rain comes so abundantly that it starts to gather like some kind of a stream, some kind of river, and when the drops fall on the ground, you see like these bubbles forming, because there's so much abundance of water. So once you have that amount, that's already time to make this blessing. That's what he's saying. The thing is that this is not really so common, you have this kind of water going on. It could be once in a while you get this, once in a blue moon, but not really so common, especially in Israel. And the reason is because, it's mountains and hills over there. So they don't really gather so much, the water in one place like that. Another thing is that today, the reason why it doesn't really happen so much is because we have like a sewer system, we have so that we have drainage with the water, and since the water drains down into the sewer, so you don't get such a buildup of water like that. This is the reason main reason why you don't get this. That's why, we've never seen that people make this blessing because it just doesn't happen very often. And even if it does, people don't remember, they forget, whatever. It's it's not something that it's on everybody's mind to make this blessing. Yeah, that's one thing. So, umau mevarech. So, what's a blessing, right? If this happens, imen no sadeh o modim anachnu lach. Omer. So it says if he doesn't have a field, in other words, he doesn't have any property, like some kind of farming going on. So then, what does he say? Modim anachnu lach. We thank you al kol tipa o tipa for every drop. Sheorat lanu that you brought down for us. Ve'ilu pinu maleim b'shiram. So it says, even if our mouth was full of song, kayam, like the sea, Ushonenu rina kalmon galav, and our tongue was full of right praises, like the abundant waves, ad hen, etc., right? He doesn't bring the whole text over here. Ad hen hem yodu v'barchu et shimcha, and then right says you they will thank and bless your name. Okay, Malkinu, right, our king, Bechotem, then he seals it, Baruch Ata Hashem, Rov HaHodaot. And he seals it like this, right? So what does a seal mean? It means, blessed are you, God, Rov HaHodaot. That means that we ascribe to you many praises. Many praises are ascribed to you. Vela Odaot, and the God of thanksgiving. Something like that. Ve'im yesh lo sadeh. Okay, so that's one version, right? As we said, that's when he doesn't have a field. This is what he says. By the way, honestly, I have to tell you, like in my lifetime, I've never said this blessing in my life. Maybe we should start thinking about it to sing find an occasion to say it. I don't know. But I can't tell you. I really haven't had the occasion to say this blessing. What can you do? That's the way it goes. Or if I did have the occasion, I wasn't aware of it, I forgot whatever it was, right? It slipped my mind, I don't know, whatever. So I never really, I never did it myself, and I never saw anybody else doing it either. As I said, also, it's not very common, really. Okay, great. So what else we got here? Now he tells you the other version, right? Regarding somebody who does have a field. So what difference does it make, by the way, whether he has a field or not? The difference is that, when you have one, you have to thank Hashem even more because, you benefit from the rains. Since the field, needs the rains to irrigate the field. So this is the thing. So what does he say there? So if he has a field, right, in a partnership with some other person, so what is he? Hatov v'metiv, right, which is a blessing that we bless in many occasions. This one will be also a case of that. If he has no partner, right, he's just by himself. So then he does shechianu. So there's three possibilities here going on, right? One is that he has no fields, he has no property. Number two, he has a property, but it's partnership. Number three, he's the sole owner of the property. So each one has its own blessing. Interesting. Okay, great. Fantastic. So then he says, Kakata Rab Alfas. That's what the Rif writes, right? Like whatever we just said now. והרמב"ם ז"ל ואדוני אבי ארוסה לא כתב כן. So the Rif and the Rambam wrote like that. But he says the Rosh did not write like that. אלא אם יש לו שדה אפילו אין לו בעל שותף. So he says like this, right? If you have a field, even if you don't have a partner, מברך הטוב ומיטיב, still הטוב ומיטיב, he mills. ואם אין לו שדה, he doesn't have a field, אומר מודים אנחנו לך. Then he says, right, we give thanks to you as we said. So let me ask you a question, all right? What is the difference whether he has a partnership or not? What difference does that make? In his field. Anybody have an idea on that? So the difference is like this. It really affects on who is the beneficiary of this rain. If you have a partner, you and your partner are the beneficiary. If you don't have a partner, you are the sole benefactor of this, right? So that changes the blessing, according to the Rif and the Rambam. So what does that mean? The general rule is like this, right? not only in this topic, but also in other topics as well. And I'll give you guys some examples so you understand a little bit, right? Regarding this. So the language of Hatov Mativ, right? When you say this blessing, what does it really mean? It means he is good and does good, right? So the sages darshan this meaning to say that he's good to you and does good for others. In other words, it's goodness for all kinds of people, right? Not only you. So there's several benefactors going on here, and this is the reason why we make this blessing Hatov Emitiv, which means that there's benefit to several people, more than one, plural. But when we make Shechianu, the blessing Shechianu, that means there's only one benefactor. You are the sole benefactor. This is why we make Shechianu. Not only in this case, as we said, right? Also in other cases. So it really hinges on this factor, whether you make Hatov Emitiv or Shechianu. Um, so this is the this is the theory behind what we're talking about here. Why we bless this and not that, depending on the situation. And if you don't have a field at all, so then you are not really a benefactor, directly anyway. Maybe indirectly, right? Whatever. But you are not a direct benefactor. So therefore, you don't bless either of these blessings. Rather, we say Modian or you give thanks to Hashem. As we said, that language of giving thanks. Okay, so this is the reason why it comes out to be different results. Now comes the Rosh and says the argues with the Rif and the Rambam and says, oh, whether it's partnership or not, in the field, jointly owned or not, you still have to say a Tov Emitiv, right? But didn't we just say, right, that this blessing goes for multiple benefactors? So then why would you do that? So the answer is that the Rosh probably holds that whether you are the sole owner or not, there are anyway other benefactors, right? For instance, let's say your family, right? Your children, blah 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 blah, family members, and this and that. They're also going to get benefit from this. So therefore, that's probably the reason why the Rosh says it doesn't really matter whether there's a partnership or not. It's still the same blessing, according to him. Okay, that's the story there. So that's the end of the tour, the short chapter. So we'll go to the Bit Yosef here. So where is the source for this? It says Bit Yosef, Perek Haroeh Nun Tet Amud Bet. Right, this is in Brachot, Nun Tet Amud Bet. Memata mevarchin al geshamim. When do we bless for the rain? Right, Mishyatza Chatan Likrat Kala. Piresh Rashi. Right, so literally, right, it answers when the Chatan, right, the groom comes out to meet the bride, Kala. So what does that have to do, right, with this topic? Rashi explains, "Mishyatza chatan likat kala, shamayim kivutzim al haaretz." So he says what it means is that the water is gathered on the ground, right, as we said, right, like a little pond or something there, and it's all gathering up. Ukshatipa nofelet alea. So therefore, when a new drop comes down, right, and falls on it, right, nofelet alea, notipat tachtona boretet tikrata. So what happens is, right, that it makes those bubbles, as we said, right, and comes up, to meet it. This is what it says also in Taniot. First, the parak of Tanit, Gemara Vav Amud Bet. So the truth is, that we've seen this like, once in a while, once in a blue moon, something like this. Perhaps not, in reality, more like, in like videos, films, things like this, right? Perhaps we've seen, this kind of footage. But the truth is, like in real life, you don't really see it very often. As we said, right? We gave the reasons why that is. So this is the reason why this blessing is almost never said. Besides, if people don't know about it, so much, it's not really something very publicized, whatever, very famous. It's not very well known. That's another thing. Okay, whatever. Anyway, so says the continues in the Bit Yosef. Peresham od perush acher. So it's there gives a different explanation also. שהשווקים מקלחים מים שוק מקלח וזה מקלח כנגדו. Right? So he says that means that the markets are like, streaming with water. So one stream meets the other. It's like streaming, in different directions. Like at the crossroads, right? They kind of like meet up. There's so much abundance of water going on. Okay, good. Wow. Pirat Sham, so Ran Pirat Sham says the Ran over there. שירבו המים על הארץ ויעלו אבעבועות מן המטר, right? So he's the one who mentions the bubbles, right? As we said. What happens? Because there's, gathering of water, when one drop falls, what happens is, right, that, it makes like forms bubbles, because of the abundance of water going on. Okay, great. So what else we got here? וילכו זה מכת זה, right? So then one goes to meet the other. וכך כתב הרמב"ם, זה what the Rambam says too. כתב עוד הר"ן, says the Rambam furthermore, ואף על פי שלא ידעו עדיין כדי לביאה מברכין עליהן. Oh, so he says, right, that even though enough water didn't come down, for that season, for that period, we still bless anyway. Once you have met these conditions, we bless regardless of that other factor, right, which he just mentioned. Okay, that's what he's saying. So, great. Let's see the Shulchan Aruch here. So this chapter is relatively short. We only have one more bet, right? So hopefully we'll finish it tonight. And then some, maybe even maybe. Okay, so let's see Shulchan Aruch. Yeah, we got to bring it up. It's a new chapter. So this is going to be Reish Chaf Araf. Okay. So it says here, Im hayu batzar mechamat atzilat geshamim, right? So he brings here the whole theory here, which is right that what happens over here that you have there's, people are in distress. Why? Because, there's a drought going on. Rains are not coming. So it's like the beginning of a drought, basically, right? It's not like deep into a drought yet, but whatever, something like that. So rain hasn't come for a while. So if they came, וידעו גשמים, מברכים להם, we do bless on it, right? אף על פי שלא ירדו עדיין כדי רבייה. Even though it didn't come down enough, right, to satisfy the quota, right, of that season, there's a certain quota there going on. משירדו כך כל כך שרבו על הארץ, as long as you have enough, right, coming down, as we said, right, that where it starts to gather on the ground, makes like a little pond there, whatever, right, to some kind of stream, right, and ababuot, and when the drops come down, right, it makes like these bubbles, atar from the rain, ve'alchu zeh kekazeh, and one goes to meet the other, right? In other words, you have like, they're like clashing, right, one with the other. That's what the way he describes it. Yeah. Okay. So says the Rama, "Uma she'enanu nohagim bazman hazeh." Oh, here we go. Right. The Rama says, so then why aren't we accustomed to do this nowadays? Right. Now, as we said, right, we don't see anybody doing this now. משום דמדינות אלו תדירים בגשמים ואינם נעצרים כל כך. Okay. Look what he says, right? So he says the reason is because, the countries that we live in now, right, which, he's talking about Europe, right? So over there's plenty of rains, plenty of water, irrigation, and all that stuff. So it's not really something which is, necessary, whatever, so much. So meaning what? There's no shortage, there's no drought, and this is the reason why we don't make the blessing. That's a very, very good point, to understand this whole thing here. Because as we said in the Shulchan Aruch just now, this is the theory behind this is, that there's a drought a little bit, there's a lack of rain going on, right? Shortage of rain. And that's, the whole thing, like we have like a salvation coming in here. That's why we make the blessing. But, in a country where the rains are very abundant, and there's no drought, there's no reason to make these blessings, right? That's the thing.
Can you
So,
make the blessing for the entire country? Because places big like America, there's some places that are lacking water.
yeah, so the thing is, that we're talking about the area that you live in, right? There's a drought there, It's not really the whole country.
It would be just for your area.
Yeah, your area, In other words, the state authorities are saying, yeah, we're in trouble, we got some, shortages going on. They're worried, they're talking about rationing the water, what I mean? All of a sudden, cutbacks, right? You know how things get when there's shortages, I've seen this before, by the way. In Israel, this was very common recent, like before, you know. But I remember, in my younger days in New York, there was like a year or two, there was a drought, and things were getting very serious. They started to ration the water. So what does that mean? They started to put like, filters and limiters, on the taps, to reduce the consumption. They even put like, special like, water saving toilets, to save water. This was becoming like a big thing, all of a sudden, boom. The whole thing, was overturned, the whole policy. So, it's very rare in America, this kind of situation, but it does happen. And right, probably in Europe, the situation is even better than America. They have so much water there. There's never any lack of water. And also like, countries like Turkey, for instance, they say, they have like overabundance of water there, so it's like forget about it. Nothing to talk about, they have too much. So they need to sell the water, like to get rid of it. They have to do something with it to get rid of it. Too much. So yeah. And then in Israel right now they built those desalinization plants, they built like five of them in Israel. So, basically that problem has been already, solved. But the problem is, now the prices are higher because, those plants cost money to operate. Whatever, but the point is, right, that in Israel right now, nowadays, the last like 10 years, there's no issue of droughts at all, because of that. They've solved the problem pretty much. You never know, right? For now, this problem is solved, but what can you do? It is what it is. Hopefully it'll continue that way. So that's what the Rama is saying here, So it's an important point to understand that. So besides what I told you, right, why we don't bless this blessing so often, then you see, right, that there's also this reason, which seems to be like the main reason. So okay, there you go. Pretty clear. There's a reason for everything, Let's put it this way. You shouldn't think, just a coincidence. Oh, we don't do it anymore. What do you mean? Well, there's a reason for everything. Nothing is a coincidence. Okay, great. So let's go to bed. Now he goes into the text of the blessing. So we are in the tour. We already went through that, right? So now we got to do Bet Yosef and then come back to the Shulchan Aruch. So as we said, right, there's three types of blessings that you make on this, depending on the situation. So let's see what we got. First of all, Bet Yosef brings a source for this. Halacha. Where is the source? Braita. It's so, right, Besot Perek HaIsha Rabbah. It's right over there in the Braita. Tzadik Vav Amud Aleph. And then he goes on, right, regarding the text of the blessings. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong place. Yeah, I think I'm in the Twilight Zone here. Wrong place. One second, I'm sorry. Let's try that again. That was a false start there. False alarm. Okay, so it says over here like this. What does he bless for this? Right, Perek right? Where is this? Here also in Brachot. Same page as we said before. Perek Kamat Tanit, also first Perek of Tanit. Same page as before. My Mevarech, it says over there, what do you bless on this? Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Modim Anachnu Lach. So says Rabbi Yehuda, we give thanks to you. I'll call mitipa on every drop. Sheorat talanu that you brought down for us, with the rain or whatever. The Rabbi Yochanan Mesahemba, Rabbi Yochanan concludes, Hachi, like this. Iru pinu male shira kayam, if, right, our mouth was full of song, like the sea, Baruch, and then, etc., 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 etc. And then he seals it, Baruch Ata Hashem, Roba Odaot. Blessed are you, God, right? Great thanksgivings. So he makes a deduction here. Rova odot velokol odot. Right? And the abundance of thanksgivings, but not all thanksgivings. Amar Rava ema ela odot. So, right, Rava says, no, you should say the God of thanksgiving. Amar Papa yilkach nimrinum terbayu. So Papa says, you know what? Since the rabbi said two things, let's say both of them, let's combine them. Let's put them together. Why not? Okay. Sounds good. כתב הר"ן, דרבי יוחנן מסיים מרוב ההודעות ממש מלא. So right, the Ran says that Rabbi Yochanan, right, as we said abundance of thanksgiving. ומש מלא לשון ריבוי. So it implies, right, that it's a language of abundance. והקשינן דהה משמע מרוב ההודעות. And then we ask the question there, because it implies, right, that abundance of thanksgivings, but not all of them. In other words, what are you trying to say, right? That We don't give all Thanksgiving. We don't give thanks only most of them. Doesn't seem to make sense. So Gemara asks a question on that. So therefore, Rava said, "Ela odod." Right? What you should say is the God of Thanksgiving. Ve'ata Rab Papa be'amar, and then Rab Papa comes and says, "Techevan de'amar ela odaot." Since he said the God of Thanksgiving, hare piresh ten rov ze ela lashon segiut, veribui. So you see from there, right, that this rov, it doesn't mean like most, it means much. לפיכך צריך לומר ברוך אל רוב ההודעות, או מלך רוב ההודעות. So therefore he says you have to say like this, right? Blessed is the God of many thanksgiving, or the King of Thanksgiving, וההודעות, רוב ההודעות, many thanksgivings, ועל ההודעות, ועל ההודעות, and think God of Thanksgiving, ושמא עשו רוב זה תואר. So he says maybe, right, this language of rov, abundance, is like some kind of description, adjective, whatever. כמו רב, like רב, like many. וכן מרוב עונים ואמיץ כוח, like this verse, right, it means from ישעיהו, הוא תואר על משקל ועוז פניו ישונה. So he says, right, that's like a description, whatever, descriptive. והרמב"ם כתב פרק י', so says the Rambam, וחותן ברוך אתה השם אל רוב ההודעות. So he says, you seal it like this, right? Blessed are you, God of the right many thanksgivings, and praises. ותוספת זה, ותשובות תשבחות לא ידעתי למה. So he says, I don't know why they put the praises also, why they added that. In other words, it seems to be like extra baggage there, excess baggage, not really very genuine. כתב רבנו מנוח, so this rabbi says, מפני שבסיבת הרעב בני אדם יוצאים ללסתם לשפוך. Oh boy. So he gives an interesting explanation. So he says, because there's a drought, right? When things get hairy like that, there's a drought going on, right? So what happens is that people get very like tense. So what they do is they start to like rob and steal. They start to like get into criminal activity. And also there's going to be bloodshed. So in other words, the lack of abundance, the lack of the water, the drought makes people desperate, and they do desperate things like stealing, and attacking people, killing people, God knows what. So it says also another thing, right? When you have a drought, also he says it increases diseases. Wow. Leolam, right? It increases diseases. So therefore they also decree to say that you saved us from a sword. When you saved us from the pestilence, whatever. Mecholaim Rabim, and many sicknesses. You took this out from there. So in other words, you see, right, that drought leads to all kinds of very negative, side effects, right? Yeah, which is true. These things are known. Yeah. Okay, great. So let's move on. So it says, "Ve'im yesh lo sadeh im acher b'shutafut." So now he gets into the point, right? Depending on if you have a jointly owned property or solely owned. So it says, where is this? Nun Dal Amud Aleph. Tanan. It says there in the Mishnah, "Ala geshamim ve'ala besarot tovot omer baruch tov v'metiv." So he says regarding the rains and good tidings, we say tov metiv, right? Which is a good thing, right? Good blessing. בגמרא ועל הגשמים הטוב והמיטיב. So it says in Gemara that In the Gemara, right, it says there in the Nun Amud Bet, regarding the rains, right, Tov Metiv, Mevarech ve'amar, you bless that, ve'amar Rabbi Avhu, my Mevarech modim anachnu lach. What do you bless, right? We give thanks to you. Lo kasha. So there's no difficulty. In other words, there seems to be a discrepancy here. Ha de shama mishma, ha de chaza michse. One is talking about when he heard about it, one is talking about he actually saw it. The shama mishma aino besorot tovot. So when we say, right, they heard about it, that's like good news, good tidings. Ela idi ve'idi de chaza michse. Rather, they're both talking about when he saw them. Velo kashya, no difficulty. Ha de atapurta, hu de atatuva. Ha de atatuva. One is talking about when little came, one is talking about lot came. Ve'ibaitema, if you prefer, I can tell you. Ha de atatuva velo kashya. This talking about when there's a lot of came and there's no difficulty. Ha de itle ara, ha de letle ara. One is talking about where he has land, one is talking about he has no land. So that's how the Gemara qualifies all these things. And that's where we get these halachot from, right? That we learn in the Torah, coming from this Gemara. Itle ara hatov metiv. So if he has land, he says hatov metiv, as we said, right? Because there are several benefactors. והחתן בנה בית חדש. One second, I'm sorry. Yeah. טוב ומטיב, מברך. Tanan, right? Yeah. So he blesses right Tov Metiv, but it says we learn in the Mishnah, right? Bana Beit Chadash. If you build a new house, we cannot kelim chadashim, or you bought new utensils. Omer Shechianu says Shechianu, but you know. So in other words, we have here also discrepancy, right? One says you do Shechianu, one says you do Tov Metiv. La kashia ha de itle shutafut ha de letle shutafut. So he says not difficult. One is talking about where there's a partnership, it's jointly owned. One is talking about solely owned. As we explained right in the beginning, that's the way it works. Okay, great. Umashma le'arif. So he says the Rif, right, implies his words, that when we answered this, right, this question in the Gemara, that's not difficult. How to eat le shutafut? One is talking about there is partnership. So he says he's talking about a case where he has land, but no partnership. It's solely owned. Im achar mevarech shechianu ve'enu ditnan. So he says if somebody else is blessing, make shechianu ve'enu ditnan. That's how we learn in the Mishnah. But not bait chadash. If you build a new house, we cannot kelim chadashim, or you bought new utensils. Omer shechianu. It says shechianu. Vet itle ba shutafut. And if there's a partnership there, like from with another person, then he blesses the tov metiv. Okay, great. Well, we still have a little bit more to go. So that's what we learned regarding the rains, and the right, good tidings. That's what he says. But he doesn't. If he doesn't have land, so then we do modim, right? Different blessing, as we said in the beginning. We bless you, and we give thanks to you. The Rambam also says like that. So the Rif and the Rambam are in the same camp, right? The same page, as we already described in the tour before. As we said, right? The Rosh has a different opinion, so he brings it over here. Rosh katav, says the Rosh. That which we said, right? That he has to have a partner in the land. Because since he does have land, ben shchenav meshutafim imo, whether his neighbors are partners with him, right? Come say, kol shchenav All his neighbors are partners with him. Therefore, he says, so he says, therefore, the proper text seems to be that like this text. They're both talking about where he has his own land. And it's not difficult. One is talking about where others also have partnership with him. And the other one is talking about there's no partners there. Perush Bait Chadash Bekelim Chadashim. So, right, what does it mean you bought a new house, right? Or what do you call it? New utensils. So it doesn't belong to anybody else, right? Just yours. Behedia Shutafut Mevarech Shechianu. Bahadeh. Other people are not with him, so therefore, right, since he's the sole owner, right, he does Shechianu. But it says when it comes to rain, where there are other benefactors, as we said, besides him, it's good for everybody, right? Because the benefit of the rain, right, is for all the landowners, right, the field owners, whatever. So then you bless the Tov Metiv. And if he doesn't have any land, right, this person, not a landowner, so then he blesses Modim. Okay, great. So then he goes on. So says the Rashba, it's possible to say that maskana nami hechad deshama v'lo chaza. He says the conclusion could be that if when he heard but he didn't see, he blessed the Tov Metiv. In other words, this doesn't contradict the other way of learning this right, topic matter. They could be both true and both halacha. Okay, so then he goes on. Katav Samak says the Samak. The Berkat Geshem ena noeget ata. So he also says, right, that we just mentioned before. So he says nowadays we don't do this rain blessing, right? We don't do it. That's not the custom anymore. Not customary. But he says he didn't give a reason for that, right? So we did see the reason in the Ramah, right? But this rabbi doesn't give a reason. He just says it's not customary. The Kolbo katav b'zil lashano. What does the Kolbo say? Yesh omrim she'en birkat Hashem noeg ata v'nim lefi she'enu tzadrin b'notar. So he brings the reason of the Ramah, right? Probably the Ramah got it from here. That the reason is because we don't have shortages of water in general, right? In Europe, that's the way it was. There was abundance of water there. So it says that we're not really, desperate for water. And so they were not so, joyous, right? When rain comes, like some kind of a festival going on there. And it's not like that. It's not like those lands, which have a lot of dryness going on there, right? Like in the Middle East. Right? And they have droughts going on there, all the time. So they need, some heavenly mercies there to get some rain on the ground. So he says, but we don't require this, right? So much. This is the reason why we don't bless this blessing, right? That's exactly what the Ramah said, right? So you see, it comes from here, the words of the Ramah. Okay, great. That's very important to know. So who was this? The Kolbo. He was the one who came up with this concept here. While the Samak, just said that it's not customary. We didn't give the reason. Okay, well, there you go. So it says Beit Yosef, he comments on that. So it seems like it's coming to teach you that meaning what? That when the right, there are good years, right, with plenty of water, plenty of right irrigation, plenty of precipitation. It's all good. So then you don't have to make this blessing, right? It's not for those times. It's not for times of plenty. ודאי פשיטא שאפילו באותם ארצות שרגילים במטר, so it's obvious that even those lands which are, regular to get plenty of water, even נעצרו הגשמים, but if there was a drought, right, as we said, right, even in New York there was drought. I remember that. אם נעצרו הגשמים, והיה העולם בצר, and right, people were, suffering, whatever, it's a, difficult situation. ואחר כך ירדו גשמים, and then the rain came right afterwards, and we had relief, צריך לברך, so you do have to bless in a case like that. Okay, great. אם אתם אומרים הלל הגדול על הגשמים, כתב רבנו בסימן תקע"ה. So he says there's also another issue, which is, when do we say Hallel for the rains? So he says that's in a different chapter. Okay, that's 575. So we'll deal with it when we get there, right? The Vina there. Okay, fine. So okay, we're done with this Bit Yosef. Now we got Shulchan Aruch, and we're done with the chapter 2. So Shulchan Aruch, my barech, right? What do you bless, right, on this rain thing? Right? Iman lo sadeh omer. He doesn't have a field. He says, "Modim anachnu lach," right? We give thanks to you, right? Hashem Elokeinu al kol tipa utipa shehoradta lanu ve'ilu pinu maleh shira kayam. Right? So I'm not going to translate it again. I already did it one time. I'm such a lazy guy. Okay, right. So whatever. Right. Okay. So ad hen yodu vivarchu et shimcha l'malkeinu. Right? Until this point, right? The chotem. So you say all that, right? All that text there, and then you seal it. Baruch Atah Hashem El Rov Ha'odot, right? The God of many thanksgiving, right? Numerous thanksgiving, whatever. Ve'im yesh lo sadeh b'shutafut im acher. So he says, what about if you have a partnership, right, in the field? Then you do hamatov metiv, because this blessing is for, as we said, right, multiple benefactors. If he has no partner, so then there's Shechyan, right? Which implies that it's only one benefactor. And that's it, right? That's the way the Tur and the Rambam paskin, as opposed to the Rosh, right? Who had a different idea. So he brings this Rosh, right? Or maybe something here, right? In the Ramah here. Right. So it's not really the Rosh here. There's a different opinion here. Some say that this also applies even if you heard that the rains came. In other words, you didn't see it; you just like heard about it. So we did this. We did see this opinion in the Beit Yosef, if you recall. So do we paskin like that? Probably not. It's not really the main opinion here. Minority opinion. So probably we're going to refrain from that. Because otherwise, if one person saw, right, and he got on the internet, right, and he publicized it, we would have to all bless, because of just one person. So really we don't see this kind of thing, practically speaking, right, occurring. So whatever, it is what it is. So probably we're not going to do that. Anyway, let's see what the Mishnah Berurah says, just out of curiosity. What does he say about this opinion? Yeah, so Mishnah Berurah does a nice job over here. He brings right that there's a machloket about this. Some say you can bless, But he says, he concludes, but because of the doubt, right? He says, better to refrain, right? Don't get into it. Don't say this blessing when you hear about it, only when you see it. Okay, so that was my conclusion also, right? Okay, so we're on the same page here, right? Me, Mishnah Brura, right? Everybody else. Okay, great, fantastic. So there you go, right? That's the way it goes. Okay, fantastic. So we're done with this chapter. I guess we'll stop here, we'll start Business Hashem next time, the next chapter. So we're moving along very well, thank God. Okay, so be blessed with wealth and health and happiness. Thanks for coming tonight. Chazak Baruch, Laila Tov. We'll see you tomorrow, Business Hashem.
Thank you, Rabbi.
God bless.